Hello, everybody. It's been a long time, but here we go. I'm going to get back at it, and I'll explain more about the whole deal for my hiatus. Yeah, probably Tuesday night. So if you are there and you're going to watch this and see this, hey, thanks a lot. There's a lot that's went on here the last couple months since I've not been able to do any videos. And I thought, yeah, this would be a good time to maybe get with you and share something with you that just happened to me. And I'm telling you, this is crazy. I cannot fathom this. I just can't. So you're going to see what I'm talking about. But here in just a moment, I think I need to adjust a light here. So let's see if maybe this helps. Yeah, now I got two shadows in the back. Oh well. I'm not trying to make this perfect, but either way. So here's the deal. You all know that I'm a preacher in the Church of Christ. I preach at the West Side Church of Christ in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm not your typical Church of Christ preacher. I believe in teaching the truth. Okay, so don't get so mad at me. What I mean by that is I simply want to teach and preach what is right, what the scriptures say. And for a very long time in my life, I did not do that. I found myself being just the kind of preacher that, hey, you go to there was a website that I would use a lot. No, I don't remember. Online. I don't even remember. So anyway, you're so busy, you're trying to do all this other stuff, and last thing you can do, right, is preach. So you borrow an outline from somebody, or whatever. So I was that kind of preacher, sadly, and I hate to admit that. Don't get me wrong, I preached and I made my own lessons and stuff, and I've always studied, but what you're taught in preaching school is more often than not how to be a preacher, not the attitude that you should have, not the drive that you should have, but it's the things that are accepted by everybody, and don't rock the boat. And I know that's not what they say, but that's what they say. And I'll tell you this: I never went to preaching school. I did not. Don't have a doctorate. Everything I have learned has been from just plain old fashioned, open up the Bible and start studying it. And because I did that for many years, I saw things that simply weren't right. When you consider what was going on in the first century. I need to adjust this a little bit. I don't know. It'll just have to be the other cameras for YouTube. By the way, YouTube at Restoration Movement 2.0. Lots of good videos there that we've done over the years, last 2 or 3 years. so anyway, I was just this Church of Christ preacher that was preaching just like everybody else, which is not a problem if what everybody else is saying is the truth. So for years and years, I saw things that just didn't add up. The first thing that I saw was Matthew 5, verse 17 and 18. So check this out. This is where Jesus says, I did not come to abolish or to destroy the law. I didn't come to destroy it, but to fulfill it or abolish. It depends on what version you're reading. So he says, I didn't come here to destroy this, but to fulfill it. So listen to this. I'm gonna read this. When I was 17 years old, this is what I saw. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Now, what I was taught in the Church of Christ as I was growing up, what I taught for many years as a Church of Christ preacher, and I'm still a Church of Christ preacher, it's just now I'm a first century Bible-believing, Bible-following Church of Christ preacher. Church of Christ being the Lord's church, Matthew 16, 18, Church of Christ, right? Not Church of Christ, 3 words on a sign. All right. So just try to get that out of the way right now. So I would teach that everything was fulfilled. It had to be. Something never made sense because this is what you're supposed to teach. Matter of fact, the reason I'm making this video tonight is because I'm really taken back by something that just happened to me. I just visited a local congregation. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I will say they're on the southwest side of town, just outside of the Indianapolis city limits, on the southwest side of town. It's the first one you're going to come to on the southwest side of Indianapolis, just outside of the city limits. Church of Christ. And I'm just blown away at the utter disregard for the truth that these men had. I'm not saying they're bad men. One was a preacher slash elder. The other was an elder. And but I'll get that in just a moment. So I went to them and back to Matthew 5, verse 17 and 18. When I was 17 years old, I saw something here that didn't add up. Because it says that Jesus didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. And then verse 18, he says, truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. So, by my paradigm, what I was taught, I said in the middle of a class, the first time I'd ever sat in the adult class, right? I was still in high school. I was 17 years old. They were studying Revelation, so I wanted to sit in on it. And the preacher said, hey, yeah, go ahead. So I did. And he asked this question. He says, this is at the beginning of the study. And he says, I don't know why. Now I don't remember what point he was trying to make about everything being fulfilled. He did, believe it or not, I'm 51 years old now. And this guy, when I was 17, so however many years ago that is, I'm not a math genius. So, you're talking 30 a lot, right? Several years ago. And he actually introduced me to preterism. He didn't know it. I didn't know it. But at the beginning of his Revelation study, he says, there are several ways to interpret the book of Revelation. He had made his own study. There are several ways to interpret the book of Revelation. And so he lists them, the premillennial view. And he said, that's just totally wrong, which I agree with today. But hey, there are many of you all out there in the Church of Christ that have a lot of premillennial views, and you don't even realize it. Some of the guys that we're talking to tonight had premillennial views. I pointed that out to them; they didn't like that. Okay, so they had. He said, "There's premillennial, there's postmillennial, there's I think he even included the amillennial or the amillennial position, but he also said there's the preterist view and partial preterist." And he described the preterist view as that all things have been fulfilled, which he mostly agreed with. So he said, for the purposes of our study, this is back when I was 17 years old, sitting in the adult class at church, studying the book of Revelation, he says, we're going to take the partial preterist view. Okay. Most of the things of the Old Testament have been fulfilled. Matter of fact, that's what this preacher said tonight when I asked him if Jesus fulfilled everything like he said he was going to, and he said yes, all except his second coming. Wait a minute, what does fulfillment mean? And that the law will not pass away until everything's fulfilled. So think about this. So here was my answer. Nobody answered. So the preacher says his name was Mike, and he says, "What does this mean?" And nobody answered. So you're talking about 100 people, 70 to 100 people in this classroom situation on Sunday morning at church. And I raised my hand. I'll take a stab at it. I'm the new guy here. You can beat up on me, which they did, kind of. So at 17 years old, first time I had ever read this passage, I said it sounds like the law of Moses will not pass away until it's completely fulfilled. Okay, isn't that what it just said? Isn't that what Jesus just said? Before I even got it out. So the law of Moses will not be completely fulfilled until heaven and earth passes away. So heaven and earth is going to pass away. That means the law of Moses is still in effect. That was my answer. I mean, in a nutshell. And he shut me down before I could even get the last syllables out. So when I said what I was going to say, shrunk back, down into my seat, and everybody in the class, I mean, you're talking nearly 100 people. They all said, well, that's what it says. The preacher This went on for almost the rest of the class period. He literally had to say, "We're not talking about it anymore. We're moving on." Right there, red flag, ding, 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 ding. Right, it's just going off everywhere. So that's how it started for me, but I suppressed it. So I asked him about that, and here's the reason I suppressed that. His answer to me was, "Well, John, you will not understand these things." Because I wanted to know, hey, why does the red horse mean what it means? What about this number and that number? How did you figure out all of these symbols and what they mean? Where did you get that information? He couldn't tell me. Here was his answer. "John, when you go to Florida College, you'll understand." That was his answer. "When you go to Florida College, you'll understand." I tried to go to Florida College. I planned on it, and my wife and I talked about it. I was married, and I got married young. I was married at 19, a year out of high school. Best thing I ever did. I'm telling you, I just celebrated 32 years of marital bliss. I have been so blessed by God. It's just fantastic. I don't have anything. I mean, I had to scrape and beg to get this sheet behind me. But anyway, it's kind of a joke, but not really. So anyway, but I'm telling you, I'm the richest guy in the world, and I'm very thankful for that. So God's blessed me. So anyway, never could make it. I tried and tried and tried. So I guess I couldn't understand Revelation because I didn't go to Florida College to be taught by these guys. Well, I can tell you right now, I understand Revelation. I'm not saying I got all the answers about it, but I understand it. When it says that heaven has been opened, guess what? That means heaven has been opened. So I'm not going to argue with that from Revelation 19. I'm also not going to argue with Revelation 14 that says, "Blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on." You know, one of the pet doctrines in the Church of Christ, and none of the other denominations do this. And yes, the modern day Church of Christ is just a denomination like so many others. They're a lot closer than a lot of the others in a lot of things that they teach, you know, the plan of salvation, acts of worship, and that kind of stuff. But hey, you know, I'm not here to disparage anybody, but let's call it what it is. So you've got some of these denominational teachings that have just simply crept into the Lord's church, and there you go. That's what it is. So anyway, for many years, because I was told, because I didn't go to college, to this 2-year school and get a degree, that I couldn't understand Revelation. Okay, wait a minute. Now that I've got some age and some road behind me, that's not right. So these guys, did they go to college? The ones that Revelation was written to, were they all college educated? Did they have a few letters behind their name? Come on, guys. This is not that hard, but it's been made hard because people say it's hard. That's not right. Yes, it's difficult. And Paul, Peter said, "Hey, Paul, some things." This is after he gives his little discourse about the Olivet Discourse. That's all 2 Peter 3 is. It's not about the destruction of the world. It's the Olivet Discourse. It's the same thing. So it can't be. It's about the destruction of Jerusalem and change of the ages, the old age dying and being destroyed, and a new age being ushered in. That's all it's about, and it's just that simple. When you put aside what the lies that we have been told for 2,000 years. And what lie is that? Okay, so here's where I'm going to lose a bunch of people, but just hang in there with me. In the first century, the Jews rejected Jesus. Am I right or am I wrong about that? Am I right or am I right? That's from a movie or something, I think. They rejected Jesus. So the Jews rejected Jesus. By the way, I want to say hey to everybody. It looks like we got a lot of people joined in here real quick, so thank you for that. Also, some on YouTube. That's an awesome thing. Thank you all. Thank you all to YouTube for that. There you go. So that's the YouTube camera. So thank you for that. So let's get back to this. Now, where was I? I get distracted too easily sometimes. So I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to take a drink of my Zevia. This is pretty good stuff. Kind of addicted to it. Not addicted. I actually really like it. Okay, so here we go back to, hey, Brent, good to see you there, my friend and my brother who has started on this journey just about we're in the same class, eschatologically speaking. Brent Bishop in Springville, California, man, he is doing it to it, and he is preaching and teaching the truth. And there are preachers all across this land that are preaching the truth about the return of Jesus. So let's do this. I'll try to pick up where I left off before I got distracted. But here's the idea. Jesus basically laid it out in Matthew chapter 5, and he said, the world will not pass away until the law of Moses passes away. Well, wait a minute. Are we under the law of Moses today? Well, I could take a lot of time to illustrate to you that we are not under the law of Moses. Hi, Tanya. Great to see you. Absolutely great to see you. Miss you like crazy. So if we are still under the law of Moses, then the world, physical world, if that's the way this is what he's talking about, should still be around. Okay, so it is. But we're not under the law of Moses. The law of Moses came to an end. And it came to an end, as Jesus said, and his apostles, as signified by the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. The destruction of the temple did not bring it to an end. The destruction of the temple signified the end. There's a distinction. As long as the law had standing, this is a good way to look at this. This is Hebrews 9, verses 8 and 9. So check this out. As long as the law had standing, the temple was standing. But once the law of Moses no longer had standing, the temple would fall. That's exactly what Jesus was teaching in the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, and Revelation. Revelation is John's version of the Olivet Discourse. It's just on steroids. Okay, so when the law came to an end, the temple fell. Now, when the law came to an end and the temple was no more, that also signified, according to the Olivet Discourse. So when I refer to the Olivet Discourse, this is this speech that Jesus gave on the Mount of Olives. So here he goes through like 20-some, I think, if I've counted them right and remember. He goes through 20-some different signs of when the law will come to an end. When the Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. When these things are going to happen. Okay, his apostles understood this, and they taught it. They preached it. This is why the brethren in the first century believed that Jesus was going to come in their lifetime. Matter of fact, the preacher at this congregation that I was at tonight, I'll tell you this in just a moment. I'll tell you more about this in just a moment. He actually said, this is crazy for the Church of Christ to teach this. It's truth. But it's crazy for the modern day traditional Church of Christ to teach that you go to heaven when you die. And he quoted Revelation chapter 2 and verse 10. And guess what he says? Be faithful till death, and you'll receive the crown of life. And he explains it as when you die, you get the crown of life. Didn't Paul say that? I mean, look what Paul said in Second Timothy, I think, Philippians chapter 1. Around about verse 23, both cases he said, hey, I'm getting ready to die. Henceforth, I'm mashing these two together. But henceforth is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord would give me at that day. Okay, was Paul looking forward to going to heaven? But yet, our brethren take one passage, Luke 16, and they teach that when you die, you go to the Hadean realm. Okay, so this preacher preaches that. That is not what is going on today. If you die, you go to the Hadean realm. You're separated from God. That's what the Hadean realm was for. If you've never heard of the Hadean realm, have you ever heard of Sheol? Or remember Jesus said to the thief on the cross, he said, this day you will be with me where? In paradise. That's the Hadean realm. It's this realm. We kind of picture it as a ball because of Luke 16, right? So you got this ball. And in the middle of it there's this gulf that's fixed. It's not a Volkswagen either. And on one side is comfort, the bosom of Abraham. So people automatically picture all these millions of people sitting in Abraham's lap. Guys, it's just figurative language. And then on the other side is torture, torment kind of deal. It's hot in these flames, the rich man said. Please send Lazarus over here, just give him give me a drop of water to cool my tongue. And then he said, no, he can't do that because he can't pass over there, and you can't leave, and he can't leave, and I can't leave. Now, when you are stuck someplace, isn't it like you're in prison? You can't go. You can't go of your own free will. You are stuck there. Amen, Brother Brent. That's exactly what that means. So you guys check out Brent's comment there. He is on it. And Edward Smith, I just haven't had the time to respond to that article. I'm hoping that here in the next week or so I can get back into this. But here's what Edward says. This is the traditional answer I would imagine. So let's just see. To fulfill the law means to live by the principles from the heart. It has nothing to do with all of the prophecy that Jesus said was going to be fulfilled. No, it's just living by the heart. Brother, you missed it by a mile. Okay. So Jesus said, I'm going to fulfill it. That's what he said. I'm going to fulfill it. It won't, the law will not pass away until it's fulfilled. Your paradigm doesn't fit in there, my friend. Okay, so here's what we want to do. Stevie R. Butler, is this that 70 AD doctrine that you are teaching? Well, let me answer this way. I'm teaching exactly what they taught in the first century. They didn't know it was going to be in 70 AD, but they did know that it was going to happen in their lifetime. So I'm teaching nothing right now that you cannot find throughout the entirety of the scriptures. The Old Testament prophesied when it would happen. The New Testament said it's getting ready to happen. By the time John came on the scene and he said it is the last hour, Paul said in Romans, Romans 13, the night is almost over. It's far spent. That was that old law that was coming to an end, and the Lord was coming to bring the end of the age to an end, not the end of the world. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. And yes, if you want to call it the 70 AD doctrine, go right ahead. It still amounts to the same thing. It's biblical doctrine. It's what the New Testament brethren believed without question. Without question. Okay, so here we go. Yes, so that is a yes. It is New Testament truth. 70 AD is when it was fulfilled within their lifetime. That is what Jesus said. Let me show you this, because I turn over here to the Olivet Discourse. So I want to familiarize y'all with this for just a little. It won't take very long. So in Matthew chapter 24, verse 3, the disciples, Peter, James, and John, essentially asked Jesus. I think Mark's version makes that clear. But who asked the questions? Who were there? So let me take a look at this so I don't misrepresent it. But it says you have Peter, James, John, and Andrew were questioning him. This is Mark 13:3. Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign when all these things are going to be fulfilled? They only asked two questions, Peter, James, John, and Andrew. When will all these things be fulfilled? Now notice what it says in Matthew's version. Okay, chapter 24 and verse 3. As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples, Peter, James, John, and Andrew, came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Now, if you're reading the King James, it's going to say the end of the world. Now, you look that up, and I promise you, it's going to say aeon. That's the Greek word for age, not world. And if it's ever used as world or translated as world, it would mean, under Old English, the age, their world, not our world. So you just take that for what it is, and it's not 74. There was not even a battle, David, in 74. Just saying. By the time they got there, after a few months of building a ramp, it was over. That was it. They had all killed themselves, if you believe that story. Anyway, another set. That's just the sideline. Okay, so here we go. Jesus said, okay, I'm going to tell you when all of these things are going to happen. Well, what things? Jesus, not one mention about the destruction of the world when they asked this question, not one mention. It was all about the destruction of Jerusalem. They couldn't believe it. They showed him all of these these temples and buildings and everything that was just beautiful. And, the whole city was a fortress. And the Jews had so much confidence in Jerusalem that when the Romans came in 66, essentially, and a half, and they surrounded the city, and from that point on, the Jews said, hey, let's get into the city, because that's what they considered the Jerusalem to be, just so fortified that it would withstand the Romans' onslaught. And it took them 3.5 years to do their deed. 42 months, roughly, essentially, is the idea. So you've got all this, and Jesus says, believe it or not, it's all going to be torn down, not one stone left upon another. So this is what Jesus said. Never, ever, one time in this whole conversation up to this point, read through the 23rd chapter of Matthew, and you're going to see there's nothing whatsoever to do about the end of the world. It's the end of the age. They equated the destruction of Jerusalem and it being destroyed for the last and final time, never to be rebuilt again, not with the end of the world, but with the end of the age. And that is the language in verse 3. So Jesus goes through there and he gives them all these signs. He tells them there's going to be false messiahs. There's going to be people misled. People coming saying that they're the king. He says, verse 8, this is merely the beginning of birth pangs. There's going to be wars and rumors of wars. You've heard that. He says there's going to be this time when you're going to be hated. People are going to fall away. Verse 10, false prophets. Verse 11, lawlessness is increased. Love grows cold. These are all signs. The gospel of the kingdom, verse 14, shall be preached to the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. Well, I'm here to tell you right now, Colossians 1 and verse 6, several places teach clearly that the gospel had went out to the whole world, and it was preached in the first century. Did the end come? You better believe it did. If Jesus said the end was going to come after the gospel was preached to the whole world, then guess what? It was the end. No matter what our perception of the end is, Jesus said when the gospel is preached to the whole world, then the end comes. So whether you like his definition of the end or not, it's still his definition. We can't destroy that. Okay. Then, so just follow me on this. He says, at that time, regarding the destruction of Jerusalem, you're going to see the abomination which makes desolate. Look, check out the language there in the original. Just go to BibleHub.com and bring up the interlinear, and you're going to see these things. So here's what you've got. He says it's the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, and then Matthew adds his 2 cents worth in, and he says, let the reader understand. Go back and read the prophets. Isn't this what Jesus said? I didn't come to destroy the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill it. Are there any prophecies in the Old Testament about the return of Jesus? Yes, not the first coming, but the second coming. Yes, it's replete with them. Isaiah 25, about verse 9 or so, is very clear. Genesis, it's there. Till Shiloh come. It's there. Okay, so here you got it. Here we go. You've got all of this going on, and Jesus says the abomination of desolation is not some future event to us. Jesus said the abomination which makes desolate is going to happen in the first century. Whether you like that or not, that's what Jesus said. You argue with him. I'm done with arguing with him. I'm just accepting what he says. He says, if you're on the housetop, don't go get your stuff. If you're in the field, don't turn back. He says, if you're pregnant, woe to you who are nursing babies. Pray that your flight is not in the wintertime. Then he says, this is something, verse 21, Matthew 24, verse 21, for then there will be a great tribulation such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. He says, until now. These are the things that are going to happen in their lifetime. Now, notice what he says, that these things what are some of the things that are going to happen? These false Christs, here he is, there he is. Jesus says, don't go out. They're going to mislead you. These false wonders, false miracles. Did that happen in the first century? You better believe it. There were doctrines of demons around. There were demon possession. Do you think that's a Christian thing? No. Come on. So, he said there's these signs. So you got all these great signs and wonders, and people are going to be misled. And even the very elect could be misled. The elect being the Jews who accepted the Messiah. It's just that simple. We'll move on from there. That's what the elect is. They're also referred to as the righteous remnant. He says, verse 25, I told you all these things in advance. Just pay attention. And verse 27, just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. Go back to verse 3. They asked about, look at the Greek, his parousia, his presence. Jesus says, my presence will be like lightning that comes from the east to the west. Wherever the corpse is, verse 28, there the vultures will gather. Notice in your footnotes it says the eagles. The eagles were the standard of the Romans. So this is where they're going to gather. The reason they put vultures in there is because, hey, they see the train wreck coming. The translators are no different than anybody else, right? Okay, so they're going to protect their paradigm. It just puts them in a pretty good position to deceive others when they do it. But notice verse 29, he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light. Now remember what the question was. The question was, when will the destruction of Jerusalem happen? What's going to be the signs of this happening, equating it to the end of the age? The end of the age of the law of Moses. Not the end of the world. If you read the King James, it's going to say the end of the world. Okay, here we go. So he says, you're going in verse 29, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Well, that sounds like Judgment Day, doesn't it? The end of the world. Let's keep reading. And the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. Then will the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. What's that sound like? The end of the world, as traditionally taught. Let's keep reading. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. What does that sound like? I'm telling you right now, do your research. That is resurrection language. Jesus said they will see him coming on the clouds with his angels for judgment and resurrection. This is the same message that you see everywhere else. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5, Philippians, Colossians, Revelations, and on and on and on. It's all there. 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, Jude, Titus. It's all there. It's all the same thing, and it's all consistent. Okay, so here we go. Verse 31, he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet. Wait, what's the great trumpet? The sounding of the seventh trumpet? Where do we see that? Revelation? So you got this great trumpet, the gathering together of the elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Now, he says, learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So here he's saying this process is going to take time, but it ripens. And it doesn't take 2,000 years. It's one growing season. It's a short period of time. These things happen consecutively. There's not a great big gap like so many people are teaching. It happens consecutively. Let's see here. Where did I leave off? So you got the fig tree. And when you see that it's ripe, hey, it's the harvest time. It's time to harvest the figs. So you too, who did he say? You too, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near. Who is he? And what is near? Right at the door. He's right at the door. I can't resist this. So here's what we got to do. come over here to me with the book of James. So James, okay. Guys, I really don't mean to. This is not a tangent. This is just extra proof. James chapter 5, verse 7. Therefore, be patient. Do you remember James was one of those that asked the question? Peter, James, John, and Andrew. Therefore, be patient, brethren. James 5:7, until the coming of the Lord. The parousia of the Lord. It's the same word that he used when he asked the question in the Olivet Discourse. His presence. The presence of the Lord. He says, be patient, you brethren, be patient until the presence of the Lord, or the coming of the Lord. The parousia of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until it gets the early and late rains. Tell me if this isn't the Olivet Discourse. And you've got verse 32 and 33 talking about the fig tree ripening. And then when it's ripe, then you harvest it. You take the fruit off of it. Back to James 5:7. You too be patient, brethren. Strengthen your hearts. For the parousia, the coming of the Lord, is near. Not 2,000 years away. Not 10 million years away. It's near. It is near. Don't complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Wait a minute. He said the coming of the Lord is near. His second coming. Who's doubt? Look it up what parousia means. It's his second coming. And he says, it's near to them. And he says, you too, be patient, strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. Matthew chapter 24. Ready for this? Verse 33. So you too, does this sound like what we just read in James? When you see all these things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. Doors. Verse 34, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Jesus just said that heaven and earth was going to come to an end and pass away in their generation. But the gospel remains. His words remain. It can't be the physical heavens and earth. Okay, so outside of that, here's what I want to talk about. So these preachers and elders that I was talking to, 3 in total. There was one young man that hung by too. He was the song leader for the evening, actually. And so they stayed several pews away, and I could tell they were listening. They might deny that, but they got awful quiet. When I was talking about the world never coming to an end, and when I was asking the question, if the gospel is going to endure forever, and the mission of the church is an eternal mission, in Ephesians 3, then how is it that mission can continue if the world comes to an end? And of course, they said I was how'd they put it? Jehovah's Witness. I said, okay, if you can call me a Jehovah's Witness, then you're a premillennialist. They didn't like that. Oh, sorry. It's just me. It's simply just me. So okay, so here we go. I go in. See, we no longer have services on Sunday evening. I really wish I would have got a straw for this. It'd been much more nice, I guess. So I'm going to take a drink. For one, my throat is really raspy. I don't know if you can tell that, but I can, because we went back and forth for an hour and a half after services. Okay, so I walked in. We don't have services anymore. And so I gave my card to a couple of people, and the first guy that I really saw as I walked up the steps to this building to where their auditorium is. So several of you are going, oh, I know where this is at. There was this young man standing there, and he's dressed in his suit. He's got his tie, and I noticed he had the microphone on, so he was wound for sound, right? Guess what? he was the one preaching. So I said, hey, looks like you're the preacher tonight. And he says, yes. And he's like, well, what gave that away? I said, you got a microphone on. He's like, oh, yeah, that's a dead giveaway. Yeah, so that was a dead giveaway. Nice young man, really. And I admire him. You know, anyone who wants to put themselves in the position of standing for the Lord, amen, just go for it. But you're going to have to teach the truth. So anyway, I gave him my card. And I said, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm a preterist. He looked at me like, what? So I said, I believe Jesus has already returned, and I actually believe in heaven. Okay, guys, let me point something out. If you believe that you go to heaven, I'll put that in quotes. If you believe that you go to heaven when you die, you are believing a preterist belief. And here's the reason why. Those of us who believe that Jesus kept his word and fulfilled all things realize that the scriptures teach that salvation comes when the Lord returns. That's Hebrews 9, verse 28. He will appear a second time for salvation. Okay, so salvation comes when the Lord comes. Everybody knows that when the Lord comes, he takes everybody back to heaven, right? All of the faithful. So there's no question about this, that when the Lord comes, heaven is opened. So if you're teaching, this is the Lord's second coming. If you're teaching that you go to heaven and you believe that you go to heaven when you die, you believe what I believe, that the Lord has already returned. Heaven cannot be opened until the return of the Lord, his parousia. Let me illustrate this to you. Revelation chapter 19. Listen to this. You've got the verse chapter 19, if I didn't say that. Verse 7. Let's do this. This is real simple. Let's rejoice and be glad and give glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. This says that the marriage has come. His bride is ready. Ready for this? And it was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. Answer this. Has Jesus taken his bride? Or are we committing adultery, trying to act like his bride without being married? Come on. We all know the answer. There's only one answer to that. The Lord has married his bride. And if you see that any other way, then I have to tell you, you're waiting for something to happen that the scriptures say has already happened. Okay, so here we go. Verse 9. Then he said to me, right, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. Then I fell at his feet to worship him, but he said, do not do that. I am a fellow servant of yours and your brethren who hold the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Prophecy proves that Jesus is the Messiah. If Jesus prophesied that he would come back in the first century, in their lifetime, and he didn't do it, then guess what? It's going to fall. Okay, I'll pull those down. There we go. We'll just have our normal backdrop for a while anyway. I'm not going to stop. That was fun. So Jesus prophesied, and he said, okay, you are the bride. He's coming for his bride. This is not somewhere in the future. This is in our past. It was in their future, immediate future, soon, at hand, ready to happen. It's taking place. It's in process. Those are all of the that's all the terminology that's used in the first century. Hey, Trent, I just did this impromptu. I couldn't hold it in. Love you, brother. We're gonna do this Tuesday, by the way. You don't have a choice. I'm just telling you. Okay, so Revelation 19, verse 10. Prophecy proves that Jesus is the Messiah. If we're trying to prove that Jesus is the Messiah without prophecy and denying that he accomplished what he said he was going to accomplish, okay, you got to see this. then Jesus is a failed prophet. And you're teaching that Jesus is a failed prophet. Here's one of the points that I made to these good brethren. I asked them, how are you going to answer the Muslims? When the Muslims come to you and they say that Jesus was a false prophet because he said he was coming back in their lifetime, the only hope you've got, and I'm telling you right now, this was my answer to them, is to beg them to believe you because you believe it. You have no proof about what you're saying. However, if Jesus fulfilled what he said in the first century, and you tell these guys that say Jesus was a failed prophet because he said he was coming back in their lifetime and he didn't, and you prove to them that he kept his word and he is the prophet and we're to listen to him and follow him, there you go, Islam done. It's just that simple. If you don't use prophecy to prove that Jesus was the Messiah and that he fulfilled everything as he said he would already, not beg someone to believe it because you believe it, prove it because that's what the scriptures say, then, oh man, these guys, they cringe. They don't like that. That's powerful truth. That's Romans 1:16, powerful truth. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Jesus said in Mark chapter 18, I think it starts in verse 4, but by the time you get through verse 38, he says, and into Mark chapter 9 and verse 1, he says, if you're ashamed of me and my words in this generation, the generation he said he promised to come back to, then I'll be ashamed of you. That's what Jesus told them. He was talking about his return. Read it. Mark 8, 34 through 9, verse 1 or so, somewhere in that range. Don't take my word for it. Read it. Okay, so back to Revelation. Listen to this. Verse 11, chapter 19, verse 11. I saw heaven opened. Heaven was opened at the time Jesus takes his bride. It's already happened. Satan has been bound, released, defeated, thrown into the lake of fire already. Ready for this? You can breathe a sigh of relief. There is no devil today. There is no devil today. Okay, so everybody's going to go, I'm done. I'm not listening to this guy anymore. He is a, what they call me, Jehovah's Witness. This is just what the scriptures teach. Do you really think that God would give us, I mean, really, come on, guys. Would God give us, for 2,000 years, someone to just torment us and torment us and torment us, and we would have no way, since all the apostles are gone and all of the gifts are gone, to do anything about it? Do you really think God is that mean? Absolutely not. And I'm going to show you that Satan has been thrown into the lake of fire. This is, if heaven is opened, the souls in Hades have come out of it and entered through the gate. When the New Jerusalem comes down, this is the remainder, the balance of Revelation from where we were reading. But let me skip forward. Verse 7, chapter 20. When the 1,000 years were completed, Satan will be released from his prison. The 1,000 years has already passed. It's figurative. The 1,000 years is that time period from the cross, essentially, to the destruction of the temple, that interim period when the saints were reigning with Christ. That's happened in the first century. All these things were fulfilled in the first century. And the reason that's good